Hey everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel where tech meets creativity. And in today's automation video, we'll be looking at the UiPath REFramework. And whether you're a beginner or an experienced developer, this video will be helping you in some sort of way. So, what we'll be covering in today's video, we'll be looking at what is the REFramework. Why do you even need it at the end of the day? Why do you need the REFramework? And then we'll be looking at the processes that can work with the REFramework, as well as the dispatch performer model, and then the four key stages of the REFramework. Yeah, so let's go ahead and jump in. So what the REFramework? Let me pick something. So I'll pick my box. So we're looking at that REFramework, right? So I'll maximize this a bit. Make them like 100. Yeah, something like that. I'll try to shrink it a bit. So REFramework, as the name suggests, is a very useful framework that was built by the UiPath team to basically guide developers to create robust, scalable, and error-friendly bots. So, we as the automation developers, we spend a lot of time creating the solutions for our end users. So the REFramework is doing the heavy lifting for you. It will worry about the handling of exceptions. It will care about the logging, and it will actually give you a clear structure that you can follow, so that for you can only consider the business logic. Yeah, so that's what the REFramework is about. So the R stands for robotic, and then the E, enterprise. So the full name, if you hear about Robotic Enterprise Framework, just know it's nothing out of the ordinary. Still the REFramework. This is just the short form. So that's it, basically, in the nutshell. So we have different processes that are affected by that can work with the REFramework. So we have the linear process. We have iterative, and as well we have the transactional. So we'll be looking at them in a bit transactional. So allow me to grab this as well. Let me put them process types. I'll give this a color. Let me give it green. Sorry, orange, just like the one for UiPath. So I have linear, iterative, and transactional. So the linear, so basically a linear process is basically performed once. Any kind of process that you do it once, and to do it another time you have to execute the bot again. That is a kind of a linear process. Right? You don't need to do it more than once, you just do it once. Then iterative, actually I got the spelling wrong. Iterative is like that. I'd misplaced the R. So iterative, it's repetitive. If you know about looping, like you're doing something more than once. So we're doing a particular process, but more than once for different sets of data. We could have a particular data, but it's going through the same series of steps. For example, I'm reading an email from an Excel file, and then I'm sending it a personalized message. So, but we have different emails, but the steps that we're going through are the same. So that could be iterative. Then it brings us to our last one, which is the transactional. So the transactional is very, very similar. It's kind of similar to the iterative, but where the main distinction comes in is that when you're working with the iterative, it's like sort of this traditional looping through. So in case of failure, your entire process will fail. But with transaction, you're dealing with a single item. In case of failure for a single item, you can carry on with other processes. Yeah, so that's the main distinction. With iterative, you're dealing with a bulk. You read that in a bulk way, but with transactional, you're dealing with a single item at a time. What the REFramework helps us to do is to have independent, like we have different moving parts coupled together, but at the end of the day, they are decoupled. Like each of the component can be on its own, and that's where the transaction comes in. But more similar to the iterative, though the uniqueness comes in there. So for whichever type of process, the REFramework, whether it is linear, whether it is iterative or transactional, the REFramework can still work with that. So that's that about the processes. Then it brings me to my second point, which is the dispatcher and performer model. So for the dispatcher and performer model, come in here. So I'll say this is my dispatcher. So what the dispatcher does, it's basically it prepares or produces or prepares the data to be consumed by the performer. So let me even make it. So the default REFramework, like how see it works with what we call Orchestrator Queues, right? Orchestrator Queues. So in the incident that you're working with the default Orchestrator Queues, so that the dispatcher in this case will be pushing, like preparing the data by pushing the whichever data it could be reading just data from an Excel file and then pushing it to the orchestrator queues. So when it pushes it to the orchestrator queue, then we're having our performer, which, so what the performer does, consumes data prepared by the dispatcher. I'll be explaining in a minute. By the dispatcher. What do I want to do? Okay, whatsoever. So this one, it will just consume like that. Consumes. So first, let me say, I'm taking in different emails, right? Taking in different emails using my dispatcher. I'm taking in different emails and pushing them to the orchestrator queue, right? So once I have all of them pushed to the orchestrator queue by the dispatcher bot, in this case following the dispatcher performer model, so once the queues are populated, then the performer bot will be triggered to consume all the emails and then send out send out customized messages to each of the emails. So this one will just consume. So I feel like that's clear. So that's it about for the dispatch and performer model. So we haven't looked at the orchestrator, but we'll be looking at those in details. So that brings me to my other point that we talked about of the four key parts of the four key stages of the REFramework. 4 key stages of the REFramework. So the 4 key stages, we'll be looking at them. So firstly, we have what we call the initialization. The name is actually very similar to what happens in at that stage. Initialization. So in our previous video, we did look at state machines. So the REFramework, all these 4 stages that we're talking about, they are 4 states, right? So we start off with the initialization stage. So what happens at the initialization stage? 2 things mainly happen. We are reading data in our configuration file. What could be the data in our configuration file? For example, you could have credentials of an application that the bot has to use when it's opening or logging into an application. It could have file paths to directories. So those are some of the details that could be embedded in a configuration file. It will become much more clear when you go into the demo. And then we, as the name says, initialization, we also initialize applications that you'll be working with. In the event that you have some desktop applications or web applications that you'll be working with, it is in this stage that that all that happens, right? We are reading. It's at that stage where the configurations are read. So reads config. What else I've talked about? Opening applications, initializing applications. And in case of any exception that occurs in this stage, for example, system exception, it will just transition to another stage that we look at. So these are the main things that happen here. To say therefore, so if all goes well in the initialization stage, so we get into another stage called get transaction data, right? It could be get transaction data. And as the name says, it's very clear. So this one just picks our data, whichever data that you're working with. Whether if you're working with the Orchestrator Queues, it will pick it from the Orchestrator Queues. If you're working with an Excel file, it will pick it from an Excel file. If you're working with a database, it will pick it from there. So any source, you can always change it, as you'll see when you get into the demos. So this one just picks the next item, transaction, whatever, the next item, just picking our data. And so the default one, it's attached to the queue. So the default REFramework, it will be attached to the queue. So it will be picking the next queue item. So if all is well at this stage and nothing bad happens, then if all is well, the bot picks the data, then we can transition to the next stage that we'll be looking at. But in the event when the data is done, then it transitions to a stage that you'll be seeing, which is called the end state. So if all is well, I'm picking what? I'm going to process data. And this is where the processing of my data happens. So if I'm manipulating, doing any processes, the data. So in a nutshell, this is what basically happens. So the initialization stage, the bot reads the configurations, opens the applications that you'll be working with. In the get transaction stage, it picks the data that it will be manipulating later on in the process transaction. So every time it is a success, as we said, it will be just looping through. Every time it is a success, it will come, pick another item, process, pick another item, process. So it will go on like that. If the data is still there, it will keep on going like this in a cycle. Pick new item, come back, pick new item, come back. Unless when a system exception occurs or any kind of business. So if it is a system exception, it could try again. It will just go back to the initialization stage, right? If it is a business exception which is known, it will come back here to get. And then when all is well, there is no data, the transactions are done, then it goes to this stage that we're talking about, that we call the end. We call it end process. Just a sec. Delete. End process. So these are the first steps. So what happens in the end process? So closing applications gracefully, killing those in case, because you can also use the kill activity to kill, and then logging, sending notifications if there is a need. So these are the first stages that happen in the REFramework. So in the next video, we'll be looking at the actual demo of the REFramework. As you can see here, it has a template. It says create a transactional business process that follows best practices for large-scale deployments. So as you can see, these are the 4 stages: initialization, get transaction process, end process. So we'll be going into the demo and the use case practically in the upcoming video. So a recap for what we looked at today. So we looked at the REFramework, and we've seen the processes that are affected by the REFramework. We've seen linear, iterative, transactional, and then we have seen about the dispatcher performer model, and we have seen the dispatcher prepares our data that's later consumed by our performer, and then we have also seen the 4 key stages that are involved in the REFramework. So if you did find the video useful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so that you're notified every time I upload a new video. See you in the next video. I'm out.